Welcome to the Power of One. Today, we're going to be speaking with Alison, and Alison is going to share her story with us and how we can better keep our children safe because there's so much going on in the world today, and social media does not make it better. Welcome to the show, Alison.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alison, please share with the viewers your background and how I came to meet you, which you were presenting.
Great. So my name is Alison Feigh. I serve as the director of Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. It's a program of Zero Abuse Project. Zero Abuse Project is a nonprofit working to eradicate child maltreatment in all of its forms. And Jacob Wetterling Resource Center is a part of that mission. We've been around since 1990. There was a boy named Jacob Wetterling who was abducted in central Minnesota in 1990. And his parents started a nonprofit to help prevent crimes from happening to kids. And so I was speaking at the Philadelphia Present conference when I met Melanie. I was there talking about how to balance being a parent while working in child abuse, which is one of the things I'm very passionate about. We know that a lot of the helpers burn out because vicarious trauma is real. And so I was there trying to give some support to folks about being a caregiver while working in child abuse. But my main passion, the thing I do the most, is I work in prevention. So I write curriculum. We have a curriculum that we have that we use in schools called ECAP, Expanding Child Abuse Prevention. I think everything is an acronym these days, but we have that from K through 12. I go in the schools, I train parents, I train teachers, I train kids. We want to make sure kids are walking around smart and not scared, and that's how we work through our mission.
Now, Alison, Jacob, how old were you like when he was
Sure.
abducted, and tie that in and how that helped you with your mission?
Absolutely. So Jacob, the boy who our agency is named after, it was a case of a very rare non-family abductions. We have about 115 of those a year in the United States. It's 115 too many, but it's very rare for kids to be snatched by someone unrelated to them or unknown to them. Jacob and his brother and his friend were biking home from getting a video, and a man approached them who took Jacob and let the other two go. I was a classmate of Jacob's. I grew up with Jacob. So for me as a kid, trying to wrap my head around the fact that grown-ups can do bad things to kids, like that was something I had never even thought of. I mean, I'd seen the movie Annie several times. I had a sense like Miss Hannigan is not legitimately a good person. Like I had that context, but like words like sex offender, words like abduction, those were not words in my vocabulary. So as a sixth grader, different people handle trauma in different ways. For me, I'm a kid who was always wanting to read to fix, like wanting to learn more about it. So I was in the public library asking the librarian where books were on sex offenders because I had heard on the news it was likely a sex offender had taken Jacob. I didn't know what that was. So I went, this is pre-internet, pre-Google, pre all the things. I went to my card catalog at the local library, and the librarian's like, I don't know if I should give you these books. Like, do you have a parent permission slip? Like, I don't know how to navigate this with a sixth grader. And so much of my childhood brain wanted to learn so that I could understand so that it wouldn't happen to me or anyone else that I cared about. And as an adult, I still can't wrap my head around the fact that there are people who hurt kids. But my trajectory of life was very much changed. I did my undergrad at a place called St. Olaf, which is a real place in Minnesota, not just a Golden Girls reference, where you can design your own major. So I majored in missing kids. I was also a theater communications major, but missing kids was a big passion of mine. Went and worked at the National Center for Missing Children. After that, came back to Minnesota and worked at the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. Have been on the staff there since 2001, and I'm able to come through the door of the office and see Jacob's face smiling at me every day, which just centers me, reminds me of the importance of this work. And I spend a lot of times, people say, oh, that job sounds so sad. You work with families of missing people. You work to prevent abductions. That sounds sad. I get to meet the best people in the world every day. When I'm at I just think of like this week, I was training at a crime prevention conference, school resource officers on internet safety. I was in the prison this week talking to offenders about victims' rights and about empathy as a part of Victims' Rights Week. I was with fourth graders talking about how to go from being a bystander to an upstander. I mean, I'm never bored. I meet wonderful people every day, and we just want to make sure if crimes happen to kids, no one is walking through that alone. And I was so blessed as a kid to have so many great teachers who are just figuring it out as we go. I mean, there's no playbook at that time for what do we do when this happens. Teachers were just trying to figure it out, and we as kids were trying to figure out. And it's such an honor as an adult to be able to take what I've learned. And I mean, I don't believe always that when you say when people say, well, bad things happen for a reason. It's like, I don't know if I get behind that, but I do believe that bad things happen and we choose in what ways we can respond to that. And it's a point of privilege when you're able to respond to it because you have resources and emotional intelligence, and it depends on all the different dynamics. We have people cycle breaking all the time, but I was very blessed to use what I had to help prevent crimes from happening to kids. So I went and got my master's degree in 2008 in criminal justice, and I wrote a textbook with my college professor. So if you're looking for a Mother's Day or Father's Day present, it's called Sex Crimes and the Sex Offenders. A good read before bed, right? But I wrote a college textbook as a part of my research, getting my master's degree. And I've just always been hitting the ground running, using mentors and other folks to say, what haven't we done for prevention? How can we make prevention more accessible? And talking to kids the way I, wish that I had someone talk to me during those moments. They always say, be the adult you wish you had when you were a kid. And I had amazing teachers and amazing mentors who had no knowledge really about this area. And so I'm trying to be someone who is approachable and who has good information as a way of sort of filling that gap and letting people know prevention is possible.
So now let me get this right. So from you being in 6th grade and what happened to Jacob, you carried that as an adult, and that is what molded your career.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I look at different friends of Jacob and how they took what happened. And, some of them are in medical research because they believe strongly in that. Some serve in the military because they knew that our life, how can we help other people? So, I don't think my trajectory is any more elevated than any of my other peers. I have peers who are, in law enforcement because they wanted to make sure that crimes like these are responded to. So a wide variety of different ways people handle trauma. I get really mad when I hear the phrase that hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
Because what I see daily is that healed people are healing people.
Mm-hmm.
And we all went through hurt. We went through terror in 6th grade. We're biking around the neighborhood with knives in our bike baskets. The guy who took Jacob wasn't caught for 27 years, and he was in our community that whole time. And so we were, on edge, and then on edge as parents, and on edge trying to figure out what we do with when these things that aren't supposed to happen do happen.
So the person was caught.
Person was caught 27 years after the abduction, correct.
So was Jacob's body ever found?
He did after he was arrested for having child sexual abuse material. His DNA had matched. There was a boy who is the same age as Jacob, who's now an adult, amazing person, by the way. He was abducted 9 months before Jacob was assaulted by a man with a mask and a gun, and was released. And they always assume that whoever abducted this boy at gunpoint 9 months prior is the same person who abducted Jacob later. And so they reran the clothes that young man was wearing, and had a DNA hit. And they went and did a search warrant on that individual's house. They found child sexual abuse material, images, videos, pictures, things of that nature. So they were able to hold him for a year, it was going to be longer than a year, but he had been held for a year when he said that he'd be willing to lead law enforcement to where he had buried Jacob. And so he did that a year after being caught and being in prison. And he said that he would lead law enforcement to bury Jacob if he was not prosecuted for that crime. And that was the family's call. They made that call because they wanted to know, where is Jacob? And they knew that he would probably be in for the rest of his life with the other charges. So they made that deal so that he would lead the family to where he had buried Jacob so that they could have those answers. And our crime victims usually hate the word closure, because closure means like everything's
Yeah.
all wrapped up neat in a bow and you don't have any questions. There's no such thing as closure, but answers and whatever justice might look like. And in this case, they wanted answers. They wanted to know, where is Jacob, and they were given that information, and were able to finally say goodbye to Jacob after 27 years. And I'm different people, again, have different trajectories. I'm a person of faith. And for me, my faith is a huge part of getting through the days and the weeks. And I have a belief that Jacob's work isn't done, and Jacob is still doing things from above that make the world a better place for kids here on Earth.
That's so horrible. Now, so it was 27 years, but you had already started this agency.
The family started this agency in 1990. Yep, I was a kid, so I didn't start working. Started working as a volunteer in 98, and then in 2001 I joined the team, and I've been on the team since 2001.
Okay. Wow. So now, how did that affect you? Again, I mean, I know for the family, but how did that affect you? Because you never forgot about that. I often think sometimes that people and advocates, not saying anything bad about anybody, they don't pay close attention to witnesses. And they're just as harmed and traumatized as a family member would be. And you carry that as a sixth grader. How did that impact you?
I had amazing mentors in Patty and Jerry Wetterling, the parents of Jacob, who when Jacob was taken, Patty was the president of our PTA, and Jerry was the president of Central Minnesota NAACP. He's always been very involved in racial justice work. Patty's a PTA president. So you get two people who know how to get things done, rallying. And in an early interview, I remember being a kid and seeing Patty, and she said, "This man is not going to get my other three kids. This man is not going to get my marriage. This man is not going to get my belief that the world is a good place. This man is not going to make me lose my belief in humanity. I refuse to let him have that." And I got goosebumps, and it was this moment of turning the tables. Like, he doesn't get any more than what he's gotten. And to succeed is revenge against him is sort of the way that I saw it as a kid. Like, if I, because you have survivor's guilt. Like, I remember when we were all seniors in high school and we were graduating, we had an empty chair for Jacob. It's like, we're moving on. We still are leaving space for our friend. We don't know what happened to him, right? So that idea of, it's just that complicated idea of this abductor doesn't get my joy. Like, I'm going to study abroad. I'm going to play past the driveway. I'm going to be a parent. Like, these are things he's not going to take from me. And we actually did Jacob's Friends 25 years after Jacob was taken, or was it 20 years after Jacob was taken? One of the big anniversary years. And anniversary is a complicated word because that seems like celebration. This is not a celebration. We did a PSA where we were staring at him in the camera, and we said, remember us? You took our friend years ago, but we haven't forgotten you. We're coming to get you. We've, it's again turning the tables of like, we're not giving up. We are Jacob's hope. Look over your shoulder. We're coming. And that was played everywhere. It was on America's Most Wanted. It was on Good Morning America. And I knew wherever he was going to see this, and whatever he did with it was on him. But I just wanted him to know when I wrote that ad, that again, he doesn't get our joy, and we are now in a position of power, and we are coming after him as his friends. And I needed to write that and to film that as a healing piece, because I remember as a kid feeling like this guy was so physically huge and foreboding and gigantic. And it's like your dreams, he's big, he's huge. And then when I actually sat as an adult and watched him in court, when he talked to the judge about what he had done and took ownership, I just remember thinking how small and how I don't want to say just how weak he looked, and just looking at him and being like, that's who I was afraid of for so long. Like, he's insignificant. He's weak. He's small. And he did a lot of harm, and he caused this huge ripple effect of harm with the choices that he made to abduct kids and harm kids. And I just remember sitting there and thinking, this man is so small, and I'm a part of this big team and this big belief that the world is a good place and kids deserve to be safe. And I'm glad to be on the side of the courtroom that I'm on, watching him be on that side, and just all the power they lost. I stopped having bad dreams after I saw him in person, because it was just like, he's, and I always, there's a documentary about Jacob's case that was filmed, and they just had the premiere a month ago. And in the premiere, one of the things that I say is, I think that this man, this was before he was caught. They were interviewing me before he was found. And I said, they always say that the offender is going to tell someone, right? I don't think the offender is going to come forward and say, this was me. I did it. He had a gun. He had a mask. He was one person against these little kids. Like, he's not a brave man. Like, he's not going to take ownership and say it's me. My hope is that he told somebody else, and that person is brave, and that person does the right thing. And from what we can tell, he never told anyone about his crimes. It wasn't, again, until the DNA match that they were able to build this case against him. But it's just that idea of what strength means. Like, strength is Patty and Jerry Wetterling looking for their son for 27 years while making the world a safe place for their other 3 kids, and letting their other 3 kids go to the football games and go to the school dances, which gave our parents permission to do the same. It's like, well, if Patty and Jerry are letting their kids go, I guess we're safe enough to let our kids go, and that they just set such a tone of, this guy doesn't get any more than what he's already taken. And that was a huge, just a huge positive when it came to the mind view of living through this as a kid. It was less of like passive, this is happening to me, and more of like rolling up your sleeves, like, guess what? We're gunning for you, sir.
Mm-hmm. Now, how many children did he abduct?
So Jacob is the only person who he abducted and killed. Before Jacob, he abducted several boys in central Minnesota off of their bikes, sexually assaulted them, and let them go. And so there was a pattern of that activity and those crimes leading up to Jacob's abduction. After Jacob's death, we can find no other things that match that MO after Jacob was killed. So the presumption is killing Jacob was then, he knew the whole world was looking for him, and so he stopped that behavior.
We have to keep our children safe, and with social media, it's hard. And I believe it was you that did show that video, and where there was, I don't know if it was mom and her dad, or the parent was with their baby, and these strangers were like, "Oh, hi, such and such," and said her name. Was that you? It was like,
no,
"Hi."
but I know the video you're talking about.
Yes, which I thought was so interesting, because we post our children on social media. Now, I'm not on social media, or as far as like personal, it's with the job, because I need grant funding, and they look at that. But that video struck me, and I was like, "Oh my goodness," because my daughter-in-law, which I love her, it's my daughter, but she posts my grandbabies all the time, and that's all I kept thinking about.
And I think so Patty and I have had a lot of conversations about this, because she posts her, her kids post their grandkids. I post my kid. All that. We know that most people who are harming kids online are adults wanting to talk to kids about sex on the internet over and over and over again. It's less about personal information. Like, we obviously don't want to give our garage code out online, but like, it's less about the personal information. It's more about the emotional information. Offenders are looking for things like, my parents just got divorced. I have no one to talk to. No one thinks I'm pretty, So the sex crimes against kids are almost always with that idea. 2/3 of the time, sex offenders bring up sex within the first half hour of a conversation with a kid on the internet. Like, the number one warning sign that we teach kids to look for is, that is that piece about, pay attention to grown-ups who want to talk to you about sex. And it was funny. Side note, just because you need some humor in this heavy topic, but I was talking to my own child about the internet, because she had asked if she could have a certain online game. And I said, no. And she said, well, why not? Some of my friends have that. And I said, well, I'm worried about things where adults can approach kids and talk to them. And in that game, it's pretty easy for adults to approach kids and talk to them. And I said, if an adult ever wants to talk to you about grown-up things, or if anyone in any game is talking to you about grown-up things, I want you to come and get me, because you don't always know who is who. And if they're talking about grown-up things, I want you to come and get me. I said, what's a grown-up thing that someone might bring out that means that you should come and get me? And she thought for a minute. She said, attorneys. Kids never talk about attorneys, and grown-ups talk about attorneys all the time. I was like, that's not the direction I was going, but that is correct. That is absolutely correct. And then we drilled down more into what I was talking about. But I just love that of like, yeah, if an adult is talking to you about attorneys, do get me involved. That is absolutely correct, because why are they talking about that? But it's not so much the personal information of like photos of you on the class trip, or soccer or whatever that puts kids at risk. It's far more about the emotional stuff. Offenders are looking for kids who they can isolate, who they can pour on attention, affection, who they can remove. We want to use, common sense. Like, I see sometimes parents like posting a picture of like their child's first successful trip to the potty. And it's like, does your 16-year-old want that on the internet? Right. Or I always get, people would say, your child's always so happy in the pictures of her online. I'm like, I'm not zooming in when she's having a tantrum. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, cry bigger for the camera. I'm going to use common sense. So yeah, you're going to see her smiling, because those are the pictures that are going to get posted, right? And I was talking to Patty about it, and I said, it's hard sometimes trying to figure out, where the limit is and whatever else. And she said, well, that's not how abductions work, right? That, like, we've done the research. It's not about putting up a soccer picture or a vacation picture. It's about the relationship. Offenders want to build a relationship. I'll do childcare for you for free. We want to pay attention to people who seem to like our kids more than we do, right? And so it's helpful for me to remind, like, you want to use common sense. You don't like post your street address or like what your kid's teacher's name is or what school they go to. But pictures of kids being kids and putting joy into the world tends to not put kids at risk. So I think there's just sort of a piece to think about with how we use, and I want to model consent with my kiddo. That's a big piece. So anytime, if I take a picture and I say, this picture of you at the science fair, is this one that I can post, or would you rather I just send it to grandma? Like, I want her to have say in that, but I'm also, again, not showing pictures of like first successful potty trip, or this is my child being punished. Like, the amount of things I see online on social media of like, why did you take that marker? And like, here's what's going to happen. Like, put down the phone, like, have that face-to-face, heart-to-heart conversation with the child. No one else needs to see it. So I think there's some common sense there, but I think it's less about personal and it's more about emotional. And we always say every kid should have 5 grown-ups in their life they can talk to if they have a problem. Because if they're scared to talk to mom or dad or grandma, whoever they live with, they could talk to a teacher. They can talk to the school nurse. If they're embarrassed to talk to a parent, they can talk to their auntie, right? Like, that idea of having this safety net. And once we've built the net, we have to pay attention to anyone who's trying to separate our kid from the net. Like, no one loves you but me. We're going to keep this secret together. Healthy grown-ups want to be a part of the net. Unhealthy adults want to separate, and they do that with a lot of shame and guilt. And so talking to kids about sex, asking kids sexual questions, asking kids to send sexual pictures, they're trying to do things that isolate and make the kid be quiet. And so we can get ahead of that by doing what ifs. What if you're online and someone asks you to flash them on the webcam? What if someone wants to talk to you about sex on the internet? Here's the deal. I'm not going to be mad at you. You didn't do anything wrong. You just met an adult who doesn't know the rules about safety. Come and tell me and we'll help figure this out, right? There's no problem online that can't be solved with enough helping adults. I think a lot of kids paint themselves into a corner because of hormones, because of, all the things when you're 11 to 17, all the pushing back against authority, and they'll do things online and they get in over their head and they're embarrassed to ask for help because they feel so ashamed. And so we can get ahead of that with what ifs and to go through scenarios and practice, because kids feel like, I know how to stay safe online. And they have that subjective knowledge, but the objective knowledge of what would you do if is a different kind of conversation.
That's awesome. So tell the viewers how they can get in touch with you if they want to do training for their agency.
Yeah, you can go to zeroabuseproject.org. We have a lot of different training options. I'm one person on a big team. I work with folks who are, ICAC professionals, the Internet Crimes Against Children investigators. I have folks who work in prosecuting child abuse and help train prosecutors how to do that. I work with people who prepare the next workforce to be, trauma informed and ready to hit the ground to help kids. I work with folks who train forensic interviewers to do forensic interviewing. I work with folks we have a lot of resource for survivors. And if you're an adult who's a survivor of child sexual abuse, we have Survivor Space, which has weekly chats with the therapist, tons of resources. If your partner experienced child abuse as a kid and you're looking for resources for them, you can go to Survivor Space. We have a lot of different people doing a lot of different things, and I know I'm forgetting people, and later I'm going to be at night being like, oh, I forgot the people who do this. We have people working in technology. We have people working with AI and the dangers that AI is bringing up, and how we can use AI as a tool for safety, and then just the core piece of what JWRC does, Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, is provide non-threatening, empowering messages to families so that they can take on safety ongoing. Because we want, every kid is special. Happy childhoods last a lifetime. And we want parents to have the tools to have these important conversations and to know that they're not alone if they're facing something that makes them, afraid or nervous.
So, Alison, thank you so much for joining me today. This was very informational. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I love that you have platforms to reach families where they're at, whether they're home nursing or running on the Peloton. Like, it's hard to get to all the PTA meetings and doing all the things. So the fact that you reach people where they're at and give them good resources is just so helpful. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, the goal is not to be scared. The goal is to educate yourself, and you want to educate your children to keep them safe. Thank you so much for joining us today. Peace and love.